Thank you. Thank you for this introduction, and thank you for being here. Actually, I must say this is really a nice occasion for me as well. In the first, almost in 2 years, to be standing in front of a crowd. So that's something different than talking in front of screens. So hope everything goes fine, but we will see. My name is Sander Bos. I work for the province of Friesland in the Department of European Affairs and Economic Affairs. And also I work for the Northern Netherlands together with my colleagues in Groningen and Drenthe on the Regional Research and Innovation Agenda, the RIS3, so to say. But I'm here actually to tell you about a story, a story about my journey. I want to tell you something about a journey, how I ended up actually here on this stage. And this journey starts in 2014 in La Habana in Cuba. And I first, of course, have to admit that maybe Cuba is not directly the lightning example of an island of innovation. But nevertheless, my journey starts here, and I think from this journey onwards, there are some important lessons which I learned myself. I try to make it quite a personal story on how to act in the field of innovation and how you can act yourself. Some personal lessons. But first, the story. It's 2014, and I'm walking with my close friend on the streets of La Habana, and we had quite an amazing journey. We had a journey for the last 5 or 6 months, trailing Che Guevara. Maybe you know his book, El Diario de Motocicleta, or the Motorcycle Diaries, and actually we did quite the same with the two of us. And we had a burning ambition. We had big beards, we were quite idealists, and we had a burning ambition to take on the world. But actually, when we were there in La Habana and discussing and reflecting about what we are doing, I discovered something for myself. I discovered something which was quite personal. I discovered what it meant to be home. It wasn't that I felt homesick, but for the first time I felt that I wanted to connect more to the area where I'm from. To discover where my soil lies and actually to act local. This is of course a well-known phrasing, but for me personally it was really true. I wanted still to think global, but I wanted to act more local. So where is this local for me? It's in this area. And probably some of you might know this picture. We call it here in the north the Blue Delta. And actually this is where my soil lies, and I first saw this picture, I think, 3 years ago, and it directly struck me. For me, it's not only a picture, it's more a piece of art. And I think like all other pieces of art, everyone can give their own interpretation of it. And I'd like you to just imagine yourself to be in this International Space Station, because this is where the picture is taken from the International Space Station. And just hold and think for 5 seconds, what are the first images when come to mind when you see this picture? Well, what do I see? Of course, I had a bit more time than 5 seconds to think about it before. It's here right on this paper. So let me elaborate a bit on what do I see when I look at this picture. First of all, of course, I see the islands quite close there, the islands of innovation, which this seminar, of course, is about. But what do I see more? What I don't see borders or anything. It's just an area connected with a lot of different other regions across Europe. Furthermore, I see peace and tranquility, and I see space. We are literally in space when we see this picture. And for me, it gives the space for myself to think a bit more about the bigger picture. Not to be locked in by the day-to-day business, but to zoom out a bit. And last but not least, I see also a rather vulnerable piece of land. A piece of land which doesn't escape global transitions or global challenges which we are all facing. And I named just but one of them, or some of them. For example, challenges in the field of climate change, in the field of circularity, in the field of health, in the field of the digital transformation. And I do not mention, of course, these transitions just by accident or just out of the blue, so to say, for this Blue Delta. Because these are literally the challenges which we have been named in the new RIS3 of the Northern Netherlands, which I said I work together with my colleagues on developing and implementing the RIS3 for the Northern Netherlands. And the RIS stands for the Research and Innovation Agenda for Smart Specialization. And it forms, as you might know, the basis for the deployment of European funding for the coming years. The core of this RIS3 is not so on the what or on actually putting goals to these transitions. So we don't say in this RIS3 that we want to be circular in 2030 or that we want to change the complete ecosystem in terms of the climate agenda. It is more about the how question. And from this how question, we got a lot of inspiration from the so-called mission-oriented innovation, or the mission-oriented research and innovation policy, which was stated by Mariana Mazzucato. And I first discovered the work of Mazzucato, I think it was in 2018. And it was directly quite inspired by it, because it forms a new role for the public sector. I think a new role for everyone in the ecosystem to get together around a common story, around a common myth maybe, or around a common mission, and put all resources together to challenge these missions, or to accomplish these missions better, so to say. So how do we implement this mission-oriented innovation policy here in the Northern Netherlands? I'd like to talk a bit about this picture. Actually, this picture is in the RIS3, and the citation of it is actually the work being done within the Islands of Innovation project. First of all, we try to define a strategy on different levels, on the so-called macro, meso, and micro level. On the macro level, it's about setting the common goals, or setting this common ambition, and get everyone together to share this common ambition. And I believe for us in the Northern Netherlands, the mission towards achieving broad prosperity is quite at the core of that. Secondly, on the more meso level, it's about implementing the right conditions for innovation to arise, to sprout. And this is actually, of course, the core element of what we call smart specialization and deploying the right instruments. But it doesn't stop, of course, at preconditions. In the end, it's about building projects, building new projects, and try to build new projects, experiment, and do. So this is what is being called the developing this portfolio of projects, actually, which are all under the same umbrella which is stated in the upper mission. But as said, in the RIS3, the focus not so much on the what question, on what do we want to achieve. It's more on the how question. How do we want to achieve innovation and solutions for these grand challenges, for these missions in the Northern Netherlands? And the core word is there, the innovation ecosystem. We want the innovation ecosystem to be more coherent, more inclusive, more open, and more transparent, with short lines between all the stakeholders. And this means literally all stakeholders. We believe that everyone in this ecosystem holds a puzzle to form together the larger puzzle, or the larger mission, so to say. And this means as well individuals, non-governmental organizations, the public sector, but also in terms of geography. It means large cities, it means smaller villages, but it also means, again, these islands of innovation. Because this is what we think is crucial, and we use a metaphor for that, and probably this metaphor comes back today more often, maybe more in sometimes in a more literal way when we open the dance floor. But this really is what it's about. It's about creating a dance floor and getting people to dance on this dance floor, getting people to dance maybe in new combinations, in unexpected combinations. And it's about thinking what preconditions do we need to people actually do that, to create, well, swinging dance floor, I don't know. But just a good dance floor, let's call it like that. And let me, at this moment, pause a little bit, because I started this story telling about Cuba and telling about my own personal story. So I now just explained about what we are doing in the Northern Netherlands, but I want to make it a bit personal again, because when I was on Cuba, I was, of course, not thinking about RISES 3 or innovation ecosystems. It was on a more personal level. And I want to share some lessons now for me, which I learned over the last couple of years, to actually think global but act local. How do I dance, so to say, on this dance floor? What role can I play myself? And what is my own contribution to the innovation ecosystem? And on a personal note, I received a lesson from a person here in the audience to sometimes write down your experience, which you encounter in your professional career. So I dived a bit into my archives and just wanted to pick some of these lessons and share them here with you. Okay, here we go. The first lesson is called "Look Through Someone Else's Glasses." It's quite a literal, of course, translation of a Dutch saying, but it means, for me, that you, of course, do not dance alone on a dance floor. You always have to find a partner, and you need to understand your partner in order to dance together. So always you have to think about what is in the interest of the other to actually be able to dance together. You have to understand each other. On a more macro level, I encountered this when we developed, for example, the new policy for European affairs in the province of Friesland. And one of the, major silver linings in this whole policy is actually on the title page, is a quote or a citation. "Do not ask what Europe can do for us, but what we can do for Europe." And this is, I think, an important citation to understand how to act on this dance floor. You can use it on a personal level, but you can also use it on a more organizational level. On a more personal level, I try to implement this and try to do this by literally try to be in the other's position. Over the last 2 years, this was quite difficult because we are all working from home, of course. But before that, I try to be as much as I can outside of the provincial house, to be in the other organization, to actually get a desk in the other organization, to learn and experience what is in the interest of the other. So you can understand each other, and in the end, you can more easily dance together. Second one, maybe quite familiar to some of you here as well, but I think this is a really important one for me. It's called "A flying crow always catches something." For me, this is actually the lesson why I ended up here on this stage. It means for me that you have to say yes as much as possible to questions, requests, assignments, without knowing exactly what the end goal of it is beforehand, or without knowing exactly what the intention is. In this way, your path, my path, from Cuba to here is not linear. It's a path full of different pathways, and it gives you room to discover interesting side paths, to get new experiences. We also call it, you have to create serendipity, and this word serendipity stands for me for the same thing. Third one is do, learn, and tell. This is actually a phrase which we put in quite a lot of policy letters or policy statements over the couple of years. But it's also something which I try to implement on a more personal level. For me, I studied international relations, so I have a scientific background, scientific education. And when I started in my professional career, this shaped me a bit to first start with asking the right questions, do research, do thorough research, and only after that, start with actions. And I think also in the government or in where I work, we're also rather good in thinking first quite very long about what we do, thinking about all the risks, and only then choose, and then put theory into practice. But in the recent years, I think we've learned to try to turn this around a bit. Get down to work first, experiment, and be proud of making mistakes. Be proud of them and tell about them, because from that only you learn. And then the last lesson. This is personally for me the most difficult lesson to implement, actually. It's really important. It's about creating mental space in order to think big. We, or make it personal, me, myself, I can fill my whole week with actions on a micro level, doing small tasks, avoiding problems, checking my mailbox maybe, or just all these micro things. And this leaves me no space to zoom out and look at this bigger picture, to find common solutions, to get together. And this is something I think is really important for me, but I think for a lot of people. I hear it a lot when I talk to friends, but also to colleagues, that we don't have enough of this mental space and time to really think and reflect and get together. And I wish everyone enough time and space to do that for the future, in order to think together and to connect together. Because this was the mental space which I had back in Havana in 2014. Actually, the mental space and time to think and dream big. From there on, my journey started, the journey which ended up after a lot of serendipity and by dancing with a lot of interesting people and saying yes to a lot of different things, to me here being on this stage. On my journey, I did quite a lot. I learned a lot about that, and hopefully you now saw that I like to tell about it as well a bit. So yeah, a flying crow always catches something. I wish you a very good seminar, and I would like to thank you.